Demola Olarenwaju, thank you for joining us on the deep dive today. Pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. So you certainly are one of the very few political thinkers in the PDP and perhaps the Nigerian political space in its entirety. But first, let me ask you when your love affair with politics began. Was it something that you picked from your parents at home? When did this whole love affair with politics begin with you?
I could be corny and say that, like our musicians say that, was from when I was 4 or 5 years old. But I think, the only role that my parents played was that my dad always had newspapers around. And because it was the days of the military, much of the news at that time was about, political involvement, leadership, and so on. And I got, into reading it. And that was it, basically. I just used to read a lot. Up till the time I got into the university, I wasn't particularly fascinated with politics. I just wanted to have a good time on campus, and do my thing. But I then realized that I went for a student representative council meeting. That's like the legislative arm of the student union. I went for the meeting and I was asked to comment. And because of my informed background about politics, things I had picked up, I was able to just, talk, and everyone was impressed. And that began the journey, so to speak. I eventually ended up becoming PRO of the Students' Union, and after graduation, I also got involved in politics. So by this time, we have been exposed to different politicians.
Yes, and we're going to get to that point.
So that was it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how newspapers influenced a lot of young people back in the day, and for some reason it no longer does as it used to. But that's a story for another day. But you went on to school to play politics, and like you said, you became PRO. And tell me what it was like playing politics in campus, and perhaps what the changing environment has been in campus today. I'm talking about the political nature of campus unions and politics generally on campus, how it's changed since your time. When you played politics in university days?
Well, I mean, at that time, it was the transition period. It was under the government of Olusegun Obasanjo. And the biggest thing that was happening at that time was that we were moving from the violent kind of aluta, which had happened under the military regime. We're moving to a more intellectual discourse. We used to call it scientific aluta. This is, the democratic governments were in place. And so what the Democrats would do, the governors would invite you to come and sit down and make your case. And we had several students, leaders who were good on, all the slogans and so on, but they couldn't sit to negotiate with the governor. So when the governor says, lay your demands, the grammar is bad, you can't speak. So I think there was at that time a need for some of us to come in who could sit with governors and, make positions clear, say this is what the students want, and then they would accede to our demands. So that was what it was at that time. But I think over time it has also become more that connection. What we wanted was leaders who could, students and leaders who could sit down with governors to advocate for the students. Now, I think it's at a point where the people who are advocating for the students have now become too close to those who are in power. And so what most of them are doing basically is politics, or trying to position themselves, for the future, and there's really nobody taking the side of the students. So that's where I think, it is at today.
You are a great admirer of Chief Bola Ige. Not just an admirer, probably like a student. And in some ways, he's like your spiritual father in the political space, basically. What is it about Chief Bola Ige? What was it about Chief Bola Ige that made you fall in love with his politics, fall in love with his ideology? What was special about the man?
I think the quality of his thoughts. Chief Bola Ige was somebody who could, he was not just a deep thinker, he was somebody who communicates his thoughts quite clearly. He had just one page to write his column in the Sunday Tribune back then, Uncle Bola's column, and he would expound his thoughts on various ideas within that one page. And he wrote in such a compelling way that you had to admire him. Also, listening to him speak was always it was just magnificent. And then also beyond that, was his love for humanity. He was one politician. I mean, he made me fall in love with politics. And I think, a lot of people these days are afraid of politics because of kind of politicians that they are exposed to. Chief Bola Ige, being exposed to Chief Bola Ige made me see the politician as somebody who has a deep love for humanity, who has a deep love for the people, and that has always been my my sort of focus. So I think he's my lodestar in that direction. That look, whenever you talk of the Nigerian politician, for me, I don't see your regular type of money bag politicians or people who just want to make money. I see a politician as somebody who is committed to the service of the people, and I think that's the part I want to walk. That's the part that I want to tread in.
You touched on something very interesting, which is one thing I really want to talk to you about, which is the fact that the politician in that day was the intellectual, because he had either a newspaper column to express his political ideology, or he engaged with his constituents regularly, and so people could feel the thoughts of their political leader, whether it was Ige, whether it was Babake Kere, which is Lateef Jakonde. In fact, even politicians from the north, the Adamu Chiromas, for instance, had columns that they wrote. But today, there seems to be this huge lacuna between the politician and their thought. And why is that? Is it because they no longer have to write columns, they no longer have to engage, or is it the quality of the voters? And it's strange to talk about the quality of the voters, because we're supposed to have better educated people in Nigeria today than we had in the 80s and the early 90s. But can you explain that?
I mean, I see it now. I see it now, and it's so true. There's that lacuna people don't have, but so it's obviously there. But at that time, even at that time, it wasn't necessarily every politician that was writing.
Yeah.
But a lot of them used to like to put out their thoughts. I think what we can say is that these days social media is there, although too much of it is too how do I put it now? It's too sort of regimented. It's too restricted. It's not the politician tweeting. It's probably some guy who's tweeting on his behalf, who's helping him refine his thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, that let's have politicians, the way it is for instance, in American politics.
Yeah.
Where that if Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez tweets something, it's her thoughts. There's more chance that she tweeted it. Ted Cruz is also tweeting his own thoughts. Yeah. So I think if we have more politicians on social media who actually tweet for themselves, let's get on the same page. Let's know what our politicians are thinking. But I think you are right. There's that lacuna at this time. It's there.
Before we talk about, before we go into the politics conversation proper, I'd just like to know how you joined the PDP. What led you to joining the party, and why you decided to join the PDP? Because you come from the part of the country where normally people would think you'd be a progressive, in quote, progressive, and join the party of the progressives. But for some reason, you joined the PDP. Why was that, and what drew you to the PDP?
I think I was exposed to the Alliance for Democracy quite early. The students' union leader, we had our meetings with them. They were in the opposition at that time. Yeah. And then we were students' union leaders in Ekiti State were fighting with the government of Peter Fayose at that time, and the AD was, making some offers to us, trying to use us basically. I mean, they succeeded with some of my other colleagues. So I felt, look, this Alliance for Democracy, and they're always on the pages of the newspaper saying that, this moral thing, this moral uprightness, but look at what you guys are doing, So I think that cured me of my love for the AD very quickly, and I was in a neutral position until sometime, I think in 2010. When I wasn't comfortable with the way Governor Raji Fashola was governing the state. I felt he was quite elitist. I felt the fact that he wasn't focused on low-cost housing estates. I thought it was just elitist, basically. Developing these some parts of the state at the detriment of other parts of the state. More like a tourist governor from the airport all the way to the island. He wanted it to look good, but the hinterlands weren't being developed, and I just wanted somebody else who was running. And I went on Facebook and I Googled. I went on Facebook and did a search and told people, look, I want to know those people who are running against this guy, BRF. And I found someone, Babatunde Olaleri Badamasi, and we got close, from 2010. By January 2011, I was his online campaign coordinator, and even though he lost the primaries at that time, shortly after that, I registered as a PDP card-carrying member, and I've never looked back since then. I've never regretted that decision.
And since we're talking politics now, you just touched on something that you have gotten a lot of criticisms for. You said while you were in school and the AD were trying to woo you over to their side, you always saw their thoughts on the pages of newspaper, even when they were in the opposition. So they were visible. They were running a proper opposition campaign, and they were everywhere. The PDP have somewhat been impotent in running a proper opposition against first in Lagos State and Nigeria as a whole. Is it the case that you spent about how many years in power? 16 years in power, and that made you a bit arrogant and forgotten the role of the opposition, or you just don't have the capabilities, to produce effective opposition?
I think the major thing with that is the kind of structure or the nature of both parties. Now, the AD at that time, whether it was AD, whether it was ACN, whether it was AC, they always had a central figure. At that time, especially after the other governors lost, Bola Tinubu was the key person in that party. And his chief of staff, Lai Mohammed, now became the public secretary of their party. So it was easy for them to sit down in one room and decide just to criticize anything, that was going wrong in the politics. There was basically nobody to question them. With the PDP, it's a bit different. The party has different power bases. And so trying to ensure that everybody is, their thoughts are the same on what you are trying to put out is quite difficult, because you can say something about the government of Muhammadu Buhari and your members up north feel that it's because you are being too harsh on them, because PDP has members everywhere.
Yeah.
When ACN and these guys were doing it from the southwest, there was a time I remember that they released a statement that was a bit insulting to people from the Niger Delta when Goodluck Jonathan was there. And Lai Mohammed writes in his book that their members from the Niger Delta felt bad about it, but he wasn't going to care, that he just wanted to win power. And so he didn't care, because really Bola Tinubu was his boss. He wasn't concerned with what those guys in Niger Delta were thinking. But in PDP, you have to care, because you have a Wike in the south, you have a Sheyi Makinde in the southwest, you have a governor from the southeast. So you just have to be careful, But again, that's not, I don't really think that should be an excuse. I just think that PDP is different in terms of structure, in terms of nature. PDP is a party that it doesn't dwell too much on opposition. But I think the most important thing for us to realize is that the major thing that the All Progressive Congress has shown us is that your ability to play opposition is not synonymous to your ability to govern. The fact that you know how to do good opposition doesn't mean that you know how to govern well. Yes, so I think that settles it for me.
Let's talk about your party in Lagos State. It's been incapable of putting forward a very strong opposition against the APC in Lagos State. Many would even argue that the PDP Lagos is one of the most ineffective PDPs in Nigeria. It's almost as good as, once you get a ticket on the APC side, you're as good as getting elected into office. What is the problem with Lagos, PDP? Is it an administrative problem? Is it a leadership problem? Or is it that you have double agents everywhere who are playing on both sides? What really is the problem with PDP Lagos?
To be honest, I don't know. I think it's a mix of everything. In the past few months, PDP Lagos has been quite chaotic. It has been quite chaotic, from the postponed congresses to elect state exco, to the House of Assembly congresses, to the House of Reps congresses. Till today, in so many places, we still don't know who the candidate is for the House of Reps election. Of course, PDP Lagos is like a microcosm of PDP at the national level. It's just that at the national level, they know how to manage things better. Because PDP is not a party where one person just stays somewhere and says, everybody go in this direction. And the truth is, like somebody said, that, a group of ants, acting in a single direction can sometimes be stronger than cockroaches all over the place. What we have, is there are too many people in Lagos PDP who have an idea that they know what to do. And so everybody is sort of a leader unto himself, so this person thinks is the best, that person thinks, there's just so much of that, there's just so, and we keep saying that, look, let's channel these energies outwards, channel it against the APC, don't channel it on the inside, don't channel it against each other as party members. So you have connections in Abuja, why are you using the connections in Abuja to take somebody else's ticket here within the party? Why not use those connections in Abuja to defeat APC? You know, so you know how to go to the media to speak. Why are you getting on platforms and insulting your leaders within the party, but we never hear your voice when you want to criticize the governor? So I think, you know, Lagos PDP is, and I say this, you know, with every sense of responsibility. Yeah. I think it's just a mix of so many things.
I also
honestly,
know that you have been, because you ran for publicity secretary of Lagos.
Yes, I did.
And if you asked me, any right-thinking political party shouldn't even let anybody run against you, because you've done, you know, quite frankly, an impressive job trying to publicize the party. And I thought you were going to get that ticket on the platter of gold. Imagine my shock to see you reading the books of lamentations right after the election.
I'm not sure I actually read the book of lamentations. I'm not sure I actually read it. But I mean, to be fair.
What happened, please? Because nobody still can explain what happened. What happened in that election?
Well, to be fair, our leader in the Southwest, Governor Seyi Makinde, I had his backing 100%. I had his backing. I had the backing of so many national leaders. You know, I had the backing of all the BOT members from Lagos. Everybody agreed Demola Olarenwaju was the man for the job. I had utmost backing. You know, I had utmost backing from everywhere. It was good, it was solid, it was fantastic. As a matter of fact, you know, I sat, even at that time as an aspirant, I sat in meetings where decisions were being taken over other aspirants, because by that time I had become the unofficial MC. You know, and so when they were doing their leaders meeting, they would tell me to come around, to come and introduce, you know, the various people sitting down and so on. And so being in those meetings, you know, as a matter of fact, our leaders used to say that there were just two people that were unopposed. The legal advisor, who was the only person that purchased her own form, and Demola Olarenwaju publicity. Of course, people bought forms also, but they were saying this is the guy that we're going to use. But come Congress Day, you know, a governor from the South came in, to look at the consensus list that all the leaders had done, and then allowed a small group within the party to manipulate the entire exercise. Because I mean, all the leaders, all the various groups had managed to harmonize. They had come up with a list. So this was where it was going to go, and it was balanced. And we did that because everybody felt, look, if we go to this Congress and one group wins all the others, then it becomes a problem. Because, you know, we go into the election as a divided force. And so all the major leaders within the party all sat down and all agreed on a common list. That these are the consensus candidates. I was common to all the major groups within the party. Everybody said Demola Olarenwaju publicity secretary, but there was this small fringe group, and you know, and I don't want to be disrespectful of them, because, you know, by legally they are now the ones in office, you know, so I'm not being disrespectful of them in any way. I'm just saying that this is actually what happened. But you know, so the small fringe group, you know, a minority group, to be fair, you know, they managed to get the governor to rescind his decision, because he came to the Congress venue and announced that leaders had harmonized. But the small fringe group insisted on elections. And, you know, we went into the elections, but by then our members were already leaving. Most of our supporters, our delegates, were already leaving, because where the party constitution says that where you have harmonization, where you have consensus, that, you know, the party should make efforts for consensus, and then before you go to elections. So we had achieved consensus already, and so there was no need for elections in the first place. But then, you know, elections were, and this was on a Sunday night. So we started this Congress on a Sunday night and went all the way until Monday morning. So people had left, you know, the Congress venue. People felt OC's consensus had been achieved, only for people to hear the following day that, you know, a small group had been declared itself as winner. But it's legal anyway. I mean, it is politics. Some of our people, some of our leaders are in court over it. I'm not, you know, so interested in that process. I've congratulated them, and, you know, we're just trying to get the party to win in 2023.
I mean, if that didn't shock me, I would say that the Banky W's case embarrassed me, and I'd like you to also speak to that, because we all saw, I mean, we all saw on our social media accounts, and I'm sure that, you know, in Banky's mind, while those votes were counted, you know, and his team, they were putting it out to the entire world to show what people can achieve if you believe. And 24 hours later, what we all saw with our eyes, what we all counted together, and the man we celebrated with, it became an entire fiasco 24 hours later. Can you explain to a sensible person who saw that video, who saw the counts, and the next day Banky wasn't the candidate of the people?
Well, what you saw the next day, let's be fair, what you saw the next day wasn't confirmed.
Is it confirmed now?
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. Because you see, with the case of Lagos, whatever happens in Lagos PDP,
yes,
is the NWC that has the final say. So even on this state congress matter, for a long time, we had we weren't sure. I wasn't sure whether to, and that's why I said I didn't read the book of Lamentations. I wasn't sure whether to lament or whether to be rejoicing, because we didn't even know which one National was going to accept, whether they were going to accept the kangaroo elections that had happened, or they were going to accept the consensus list from our leaders. So if it was the consensus list, it was going to be me. If it was the kangaroo congress, it was going to be the other guys.
Yeah.
And so with Banky's case, I believe that he's going to be announced eventually, because I think it's going to be a very, very terrible, not only because he actually won, but also because, we have to at some point sit down and ask ourselves as a political party, how seriously do we want the public to take us? So I think, I believe, and Banky, I've spoken with him, we spoke over the weekend, and a lot of us are, in fact, I tweeted about the issue, and it was to let people know that, look, this is wrong. And immediately after that tweet, some of our party leaders got in touch and said, look, what's this about? The interesting thing is, it wasn't just Banky that was affected. A lot of people... But because Banky is the most renowned member, he's the only one that I can say that his matter. I know people who felt they won on ground. Let me put it that way. They felt they won on ground, but by the time they heard the announcement, So and that's how it happens, because the National is here to speak on it, and at some point they are going to make a declarative statement about it, and I know that, and say that these are the winners or these are the names that we're going to submit to INEC.
Yeah.
I have very strong beliefs that Olubankole Wellington is going to be our candidate for the House of Reps constituency seat in Etiosa local government.
I think, and I'm just saying this, if you're going to be an effective opposition in Lagos State, you must at least show yourself, as a fair opposition party, and people like Banky have the ability to bring people on the fence into the party, and when he's treated like that, he could, have setting. Well, let's talk a bit about your national politics. Atiku Abubakar has been nominated as the party's candidate for a second time running. People thought the ticket was going to go to a southerner, and let me ask you honestly, do you think that the mood of the country would really support the emergence of a northern candidate, especially someone like Atiku Abubakar, who's been running for 30 years now? You surely should agree that people want a southern candidate, and how does that play out with an Atiku candidate?
I think people want a fair president, and I say that because look, I don't think the ordinary man on the street cares about these things that we're bringing up. It's the political elites that are bringing up this issue of what's it called now? This issue of ethnicity of where the next president comes from. I think the ordinary man on the street just wants a president that's going to do right by him. And again, much of the reaction is down to the ethnic politics that Muhammadu Buhari has been playing. If Muhammadu Buhari had been a fair president, people wouldn't bother so much about the ethnicity of the next president. If he had been a president who, as a Yoruba, as an Igbo person, you were guaranteed a measure of political determination or political recognition under him, if he was running an inclusive government, I don't think we would have this issue ongoing, because again, he's not the first Fulani to govern this country. You had Umaru Musa Yar'Adua. The separatist agitations were not as much as this. So I think a lot of it is down to Muhammadu Buhari. But I think at the end of the day, people are going to ask themselves a question: do you want a political party, or do you want a candidate that can make your life better? Whether he's from the north, whether he's from the south, whether he's a Muslim or whether he's Christian, or you want somebody simply on the basis of ethnic identity, or because we talk a lot about identity politics. The truth is, it's those of us who feel that we have a certain identity, who feel that because the fact that you are Yoruba makes you a certain way in a certain political group, the fact that you are Fulani makes you a certain way in a certain political group. That's why we play that kind of politics. But the people on the streets who are hungry, they don't care whether it's a Fulani man bringing the food, or an Igbo man, or a Yoruba man, or a Niger Delta man. They don't care about that. So I think this issue is, and again, we have our political radar out there. We have our political antenna up. We are looking at the whole situation, and I think that we took a calculated risk.
The argument people make is that your party started, in fact, institutionalized presidential rotation, if you'd like. And I'd like you to address this, because in my own thinking, if Obasanjo had 8 years from the southwest, Umaru Yar'Adua had 2. Jonathan completed that, which means Jonathan had 6 years. After Jonathan's 6 years, which is seen as the Southern Party, it should go back to the North, technically speaking. Is that what this was about, really?
Well, not really. The idea is that a party in the opposition cannot be too preoccupied with zoning, because the truth is, what exactly are you zoning? You are not zoning anything but positions in opposition, So there's no point zoning power when you don't have power. The APC can rightly zone because APC is in power now, so there's something to zone. The PDP cannot zone. When PDP was in power, PDP used to zone to the north, to the south, and of course, this argument did come up that the south has spent more years in power on platform of PDP than the north, but it wasn't a constitution basically. I mean, those things are going to come up if on platforms where the discussion comes up. But I think the election of His Excellency Atiku Abubakar as the presidential flag bearer of the party was a victory, not just for democracy, but a victory for a unity message, which is what PDP has been about all along. PDP has been about a unity party. PDP is not a southern party like some people think it is. It's not a northern party. PDP is a Nigerian party. Started from G34, every single state in Nigeria had a delegate coming up to that meeting at that time, So that's the kind of party that PDP is, a nationalist party. And Atiku Abubakar carefully picked his campaign message to be that of unity. He called himself the unifier, basically. And so he won northern votes, he won southern votes.
Yes.
And, I think, if we carry that momentum into the general election, it's going to be a winning message.
So I think that the person who is going to win the next election is the person who is able to convince the people in the middle. Because nobody is coming with a guaranteed 12 million votes any longer. Neither, because the truth is, if we know Buhari for who he is, he's not going to campaign around the country for anybody. He's going to go back home to Buhari.
All right, so you're right.
So there's no undue influence anywhere. Yes. So it's your ability to convince the people in the middle to switch left or right. The question I'd like to ask is, Atiku Abubakar, for all its worth, for all his accomplishment, carries a lot of baggage that has been created by the opposition. Some true, some untrue completely. How do you think he stands a chance against what will be a barrage of accusations that he's corrupt? It's even started. Some people have gone to court to say he's not a Nigerian. So many things play against him. He's over 70. Do they want a president that is that old? He privatized things for himself and his friends. How is he going to attract new voters, especially predominantly young voters who are coming to the space, to come onto his side when he appeals to the older generation, when he's perceived as being corrupt and all of that?
Well, I think, a lot of those questions have been answered in the 2019 run. The luck that we have with Atiku is that before the 2019 run, a lot of issues hung over his head, but he was able to address those a lot in that election, and then, he clinched over 11 million votes in the last election, which means 11 million people in this country are willing to have an Atiku Abubakar as president.
Yeah.
So a lot of those questions have been answered. Of course, 2023 is another election season, it's another election year. I think a lot has to be done with this campaign. I think 2023 is a young people's election, and Atiku Abubakar has to work very hard to make his campaign more attractive to young people. In fact, I think his ability to do that is what will determine whether or not he wins the next election. He has to make his campaign more energetic.
Exactly.
He has to make it more exciting.
So do you think it was a strategic blunder to have allowed Peter Obi leave the party, because he seemed to be the one to have energized the younger demography, albeit predominantly people from the southeast, but I still see that he enjoys a lot of support from certain people in the southwest, and he seemed to energize young people. Was it a strategic blunder to have let him leave the party, and can he find somebody else within the party that can mobilize that demography?
Well, truth is, I'm not sure what the party could have done to hold him back. I think Peter Obi had become so great, so in quotes, within the outside world, that the image of himself inside the PDP wasn't consistent with that. I mean, you have someone like Demola Olarenwaju who's great in the journalistic world, he has been everywhere, but when it came to the primaries, he scored 0 votes. So I think sometimes politicians have a sense of what's coming. They know that if I go to these primaries, I don't want to come out with 0 votes. And then the Anambra situation brought that, because at least most of the presidential aspirants in that race, they were guaranteed of the votes from their state. So if you're just going to get the votes from your state for yourself alone, it was enough to save your face politically. Someone like former Senate President Payosanyim was able to get I think about 18 votes, about 16 votes. His local government Ebonyi has about 18 local governments, so he was able to clear that. So when it became clear that wasn't going to happen, I think someone decided, look, I need to leave this political party. On whether PDP will be able to replicate that kind of energy, I think I think PDP knows what to do in order to get that kind of energy. Whether or not the party actually does that is what I do not know if it will be able to do it. But then again, Peter Obi is somebody. I know a lot of people were looking forward to replication of the Atiku Obi 2019 ticket. A lot of people thought that was going to be it once again, even when he was running. But I guess we are not going to see that now. And but how it is in politics. There's no vacuum. There are a lot of people who are also hoping to be VP, to be on that ticket rather than him. And I know that at the top, they are not really thinking about who has left, or we focus on who's left. But I think so I don't see what the party could have done really.
Talking seriously,
held him back.
Which candidate would you which candidate rattles you the most in the APC? That should he get the ticket is it Monday next week or so? Will give you a bit of a run for your money and will cost you sleepless nights. And which candidate do you think that emerges that you can go have a cup of coffee and then begin to share your cabinet before 2023?
Well, I imagine that the APC should come south. And I'm trying to decide whether to be honest here or whether to be political.
No, you can't
whether to be political to send a wrong signal. But I think Bola Tinubu will be a formidable candidate. Bola Tinubu will be a formidable candidate, not just because he's necessarily the best material, but I think in terms of politics, in terms of connections, in terms of the kind of politics that he plays, I think you can find some similarities between him and the core political establishment, and that could be a problem for us. He has deep connections all over the country. He's known as because for me, look, 2023, you need a president who's a deal maker. Okay, you need a president who can go to different places and bring everybody back to the table. That's what you need, because the country is too divided. So you need somebody who can bring everybody together, and I think Bola Tinubu is that kind of person. But then again, Bola Tinubu is also a flawed candidate. He has a lot of enemies within his own political party, a lot of people who don't want to see him emerge. So if a Bola Tinubu is there against an Atiku, you have a northern establishment that is going to be working against Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But then again, you cannot bet that Bola Tinubu will not reach out to that establishment and reach deals with them to play against you. So I think for me, Bola Tinubu's politics is the one that you really cannot get. But then again, his candidacy is weak because there are a lot of points to hit him on. It appears that his health is not as strong as it used to be. His hold on Lagos State is being questioned. But so I think he was the candidate that scares me the most. But he's also the candidate that you could be tempted to go and have a cup of coffee over. But that's what makes Bola Tinubu really formidable. You look at him, you can't tell. You look at him and think he's weak, and you go to sleep, and the next morning you see the polls, the man has gone ahead. So I think that's what makes him really formidable. That's what makes him formidable in my eyes. Because a lot of Nigerians like to talk online and say that Bola Tinubu is not. This man will call in favors for himself, and he will rattle that election. So he has the potential to rattle the election, but he also has the potential to crumble totally. 2023 poll. So for me, he's not. I would say is that person for me. Yes.
Okay, looking at the electoral map, and I mean because we're running out of time now. If we look at the electoral map, one of the things that made you lose the 2019 election and Atiku losing that ticket was that you lost states that you normally would win. I think you lost states like Taraba. You lost states that Jonathan and Obasanjo used to win when they ran against northern candidates. Looking at the electoral map now, if you lose those same states and then run against an APC that is likely to win a state like Lagos, Osun, maybe Ekiti state, because they have governors in these states, the electoral map doesn't look fanciful for you guys. So how are you going to win back those states that you lost in 2019 and then make inroads to these states that are already controlled by the APC?
I think one of the problems with looking at the electoral map in Nigeria is that it doesn't break it down quite well enough. They'll tell you that the north is a place where, if we get anything less than 200,000 votes in Kano, despite everybody being on the other side, now you have Kwakwan, so they are not in PDP.
Yeah.
If we get less than 200,000 votes in Kano, I would feel bad. Okay, if I see 200,000, if I see 250,000 coming from Kano on election day, I'm happy. Even though APC will probably do 1.5 from that state, but if I see our 250,000, because I know there are some local governments in Kano where PDP is a traditional base.
Yeah.
Okay, so we look at the map very deeply. In Yobe, there are two local governments that we know would always come through for PDP.
Yeah.
In Bauchi, even though when you look at this as a state, you say PDP lost that state.
Yeah.
Which again is why I think that that 2019 result was quite flawed. Because you saw local governments that had never done 200,000 votes before suddenly doing over 200,000 votes, especially from the northern areas of the country. You saw Borno State turning just 200,000 votes less than Lagos State. That's Borno State, where you had a bomb blast the day before the election, and then you still had voter turnout that was challenging the voter turnout in Lagos. It doesn't gel for me, So I really don't look at it like a credible result, But of course, that's the data that we have to work with. But we are also keeping our eyes on previous data and also looking at how it balances. So I think that PDP is going to do well. If there's any place I have some fears, it's in the southeast. But then again, it's been coming over the years from a time when PDP was in all the 5 states of the southeast. Now you have PDP having just two states in the southeast. APC has 2 states in the southeast, and then ABGA has 1. So we've been anticipating it, and the numbers from the southeast have kind of been declining since 2011, 2015. In 2019, when we picked a VP from there, the results went down even for that, and for the first time, you had Muhammadu Buhari doing 25% from three southeast states. So but we have to pick up those votes elsewhere. I think PDP will do better than usual in the southwest. I think PDP will do better than usual in the south. In the south, we traditionally do well, but we hope that the governors there are able to consolidate and do more. And then I think we will make inroads into a lot of northern states. Kaduna, I think we're going to do better than ever before. Katsina, I think we're going to do quite well. And then there's one more state over there that I think there are quite a few states. Jigawa, I think will do quite well. Now we might not necessarily carry the state. But if I'm expecting 250,000 from Kano at least, for instance. If I see 500,000 from Kano, we've won that election. I'll just go and sleep, because you know that something has flipped in the north.
Final question before I let you go. If PDP loses the 2023 election, is that a wrap for the PDP? Is that the end of
No, by no means. If there's anything, it was the loss of 2015 that should have killed the PDP off once PDP lost federal power. But there are people like myself, and for some of us, look, the truth is this: some of us are not bothered. Some of us, perhaps, I wouldn't say we don't want PDP to lose. We'll never want PDP to win. But until we are given a seat at the table where decisions are being taken, we will continue pushing within the party and letting the party understand that, look, we saw this thing coming. We saw a lot of these things coming. So if it's going to take, a couple of... But then you have to understand it from also the perspective that we as Nigerians, Nigerians affected by the misgovernance of the APC. And I know that if APC wins in 2023, the next president is going to be worse, because the message from the voters is that what Buhari did to us is not enough for us, suffer, give us more suffering, basically. That's what you are saying to them. So I'm afraid for myself as a citizen, and that PDP is going to be fine. Okay, PDP is going to be fine. In fact, some leaders in PDP might even defect to APC and still be in government. We saw it happen in 2015. I mean, the same Elder Gosde Orubebe, who was at the INEC office in 2015 screaming, is now an APC member. So you will always have that. Politicians will be fine.
Yeah.
But how about we as citizens? For me as a person, if PDP loses, I'm going to stick with the party and I'm going to keep on saying, look, start listening to those of us who are young and who are telling you that these are the things that we should run on and so on and so forth. But my life as a citizen under the APC, I wouldn't be so happy. So I think, for all our sakes, I'd like PDP to win in 2023, really.
I mean, that's a good word to draw the curtain on this conversation. I mean, it's been an incredible conversation with
Yes,
you,
it
Demola,
has.
and I hope that we can do this again sometime. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
In your coming elections.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aya.
Kirk.
Yay! How many minutes was that?
I was struggling to keep it at 30, but it passed.
It passed, I mean.